Everyone, welcome to the Black Podcast. Like every Thursday, I'm just always excited about our guests that we have on. The Black Podcast is really about studying those relevant relationships with our youth. And so yesterday was actually our 1 year anniversary. And so I need everyone to make sure that you give us a gift by sharing these videos that we have done because it's so important. The Black Podcast is not just about us, but it's about what can we do within our community to make our community better. What can we do? How can we contribute to the things that our youth, our young brothers and sisters and family need? And that's by sharing. There may be stories that you may feel like you can't relate to, but you never know who's in your circle that may need to hear these stories from our guests. And so today we have a very special guest like we do every Thursday. My name is Dr. Sherelle Hobson, and I'm a student athlete resilience coach and an athletic program enthusiast. And I really enjoy and find passion in helping coaches create environments that change the narrative of young Black males, making sure that they're provided with the tools they need to be productive, whether it's going through their future endeavors in athletics or either getting a career or becoming an entrepreneur. And I had the honor of partnering up with Mr. Brian Street, who's in the area of social work. And so he got a chance to see a different perspective dealing with our athletes or our young men who are going through the educational system. B, can you hear us? He's out traveling right now, so he's going to be in and out. He's trying to get his Wi-Fi and stuff together. But again, we want to make sure that you are sharing these videos with our guests or with your audience, because again, you never know who needs to see it and who needs to hear it. So I'm going to make sure that it is shared on my end. So please make sure you do that on yours as well. Let me see. We have a special guest, and he's going to be bringing her on right now. So I have a couple of people that are asking how you find us. We have a website called We Are HSBA, and that's where you can find out more information on what we're doing within our community and how you can help contribute. We're always looking for guests who are in who are influenced, who are in either education or who are education leaders or people that are in athletics. And we've shared so many stories with everyone, looking at everyone's different walks of life. We have different, I always tell people that they say, oh, we're all in the same storm, and we may be in the same storm, but we're not always in the same boat. And so a lot of people got the chance to really share the type of stories and type of experiences they had, whether they were growing up or even in their career, the type of things that they've gone through. And those are the things that we need in our community, is sharing real relevant stories, being as vulnerable as possible. We can't grow unless we are sharing those stories. So we need to make sure that when we are putting our podcast out, that you're doing your part and sharing it to the community. We're so honored and blessed to have the amount of audience that we've had over this past year. I think we've had probably over 150 guests on the Black Podcast. And we're not just talking about just people that we're just bringing on. We really take the time to make sure that we are bringing people on who are influencing, who are in within influence for our community, or even just with our youth, working with our youth. That's what it's all about, is making sure that we are placing the right people in front of you. So we want to make sure that everyone is doing their part in sharing these videos. A long time ago, when I've been in athletics, of course, I said my whole life, and I realized that there was a certain pattern that continued within our community, in particular with our young men, where you would see them very involved in athletics, and then there would be like this type of drop off. And that's when I became very passionate about what we're doing within the education system that helps prepare, them for the future. And so with our guest, she's going to explain and tell us all her experiences. So we have a special guest. So please make sure you are ready and tuning in. We'll be bringing her on in Let's see. Brian, we can bring our guests up to the front. Let's see, where is... Brian, can you hear us?
Hello.
All right. How are you?
I am well. Thank you, Dr. Hobson and Brian, for welcoming me. I'm super excited.
Yes, we are just so honored to have you on. We're just so excited about all the things that you're doing. I know you haven't even touched the surface yet of what you're going to be doing, but we've just been very blessed to watch your journey and how you've made a big impact within our community. We want to make sure that we maximize all our time with you. Were you able to see the live yet to share?
I haven't seen it yet, but for those of you out there that are technologically challenged just like I am, yeah, I haven't seen it yet. But
okay. So basically, when you go on there, you will see. If you go to my page, you will see the video up, and you'll just go to share.
Oh, got it. Okay, so go to your page right now. I hope you all are taking notes.
We're doing a crash course.
We are.
Now so tech savvy and
yes. So then I share it on my page. Yes.
Now you just press share at the bottom, and then you'll be live and ready to go.
Okay, I think I did.
All right. Well, you are live on your page. So we're again, and I have to tell the audience, she is a Delta, so the show is going to be amazing. Okay. So we want to thank you again for being for just being you and doing the things that you're doing within our community, because it's so important that we know your journey. A lot within our community, we've taught for a long time that you don't tell people your business, and you cover up and you mask up and you front as long as you can until you make it. And that type of approach works for a little while, but it really does our youth and our community a disservice when we're not being vulnerable or being open about our journey, because that's where we grow from. And so I want you to talk about your a little bit about your background, where you were born, and kind of the dynamics of your family.
Sure. So I will try to keep this to a minimum. But interestingly enough, so I grew up in Northeast Ohio, in a very small town called Bolivar, and it's about 15 minutes south of Canton, Ohio. Most people know where Canton is because it's the Pro Football Hall of Fame, right? And that's what we do in Ohio is football. But so I have a mother and father who have been married, 53 years now, and a family of 4. So I am the youngest of 4, and we are a very sport-oriented family. And the very interesting thing is that my mother is much more into sports than my father is. And while he follows like the Browns and the Indians, my mom knows players, like she can talk even more in depth than I can about NBA players, football players. Yep. So she really was kind of the sole introduction to sports. But I also say that my brother too, so we are 15 months apart. And, we almost grew up like twins. And I remember always wanting to kind of hang with him. And he was never like, no, you're a girl, you can't hang with me. So that's what I did. And we played basketball, right? And I always talk about how I think that's what helped me be just such a great athlete is at a young age, I was playing with the boys. So yeah, the interesting thing though about my experience is the small town that I grew up in was an all-white town. We were the only Black family. And so I was very shy because I knew that I always was different than everybody else. And even being younger, right, not really knowing exactly what it was, but just knowing that I was different. And so I didn't talk very much. And so my mother was like, at some point, we have got to get her into something because she does not talk outside of her house. So she enrolled me into Biddy Ball, which for those of you who's like 5th and 6th grade basketball, yeah. And, as I started to get good and people were kind of like, oh, she's pretty good. So I started to come out of my shell. And so that sports really has been very crucial to me. And a lot of people see me now and it's like, what? You were super shy? Absolutely. Like I would not talk. And so then, what really sport has become is this vehicle for my success and being able to have success. I want it to be, all those things you talk about, reach back and use sport in the position that I'm in to support those coming up. So yeah,
Wow.
interesting story.
Wow. Yeah, it's a similar background. I grew up also with my mother and father. So my reasons for getting into sports was a lot different than, a lot of our youth today, or why they get involved in athletics. And that was part of my dissertation was African-American males and the effects of athletics on their educational plans. And so, as you know, their motivation and their reasoning for going into sports sometimes is a lot different. Mm-hmm. And so if you can just go into, what it felt like to be in this environment and know that you're different. When you have a strong family is telling you how great you are. Family is trying to get you out. They're telling you that, girl, you got this, you got that. You're smart, you're beautiful, but you're looking at your skin, you're looking at your tone of voice, and you're like, I'm really different. Yeah. So if you can just explain how that was within the education for you, how was that experience for you with your interaction with your teachers, the other students, and just what you were dealing with internally when it came to that structure?
Sure. Yeah, it was really tough. So it wasn't until grad school that I read about a concept called stereotype threat. And once I read it, I was like, oh, that's what I was experiencing. So stereotype threat is basically the psychological pressure that the minority group, right, whether you're Black, female, whatever it is, that you experience because you are trying not to confirm or reiterate negative stereotypes that exist within whatever identity that is, right? And so what I found myself doing is just overcompensating and always feeling like I had to be great. I had to sound intelligent, right? I couldn't, and again, me talking, the less I talked, the less of an option it was for me to appear to be unintelligent. And so it was really tough. And it wasn't until, like I said, grad school that I really learned about that and tried to give myself grace to be human, right? But I imagine that all of our folks who are listening today at some way, shape, and form have dealt with this, right? This pressure to always be the best. But what I think it's helped me with, right? Because I don't think it's always negative. It's got its negative, ramifications. But one thing that I know is from this, you won't outwork me, right? So I know how to work hard, and if I hear no, I'm gonna figure it out so that I can turn it into a yes. So I don't easily get swayed by, I don't think we're gonna be able to do this, or I don't know, right? But I think that being persistent and being the only, right, and knowing how to have to survive in that has really helped me strive and be successful in my future.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that a lot of us struggle with a little bit or don't acknowledge until we get older. I know for me, I was always the girl who was the fastest. I would beat the boys. I would beat everybody, from elementary all the way up until, whenever. And so I was known as a track girl and the track star. Here comes the track star.
Yeah.
But when I got older and track was over and college was over and all that kind of stuff, I had to really relearn myself over. And all I knew was win, Mm-hmm. I mean, if you ain't gonna go live, go home,
Right.
So that was always my go-to. And so after my brother passed away, I started seeing a grieving counselor. Mm-hmm. And I think the very first session or the second session, she said something about, so when you think of life, what do you think of? And I said, winning, It's a win. You got to win. You work hard, you win, and she was like, but win against who? Like, who are you competing with? Yes. And I'm like, me. And it ain't nobody else. And so that is something that we do carry a lot because that is our part of our identity. But on the flip side, I know that my brother struggled on the other end. A lot of our males struggle with once that identity is taken from them, they really don't know who they are.
Yes.
outside of sports. And so I think that a lot of times, athletics, well, I know for like athletics is, like you said in the beginning, the vehicle for greatness.
Sure.
If it's used and the tools are used in the right way. If you have
Yes.
people in the position that can help you still find yourself within that sports. And I always talk about like LeBron James. I said, he's one guy who's super talented, but he
Sure.
also knows his voice and he knows his worth. He
Yes.
knows I can stop dribbling this basketball and shut all this stuff down, or I can speak my voice and be myself and still do this, and you just have to respect it. And so I think he does a really good job of helping athletes get in that space to where they can feel comfortable understanding who they are. And I don't think that we teach that enough within our community because we're so, focused on pushing them to the next level, So if you can just talk about when you started your journey on graduated from school, did you went on to college, did you play sports there? If you can talk more about that journey and then how you moved on into what you decided you wanted to do.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you talked about like this identity that often Black males have around being an athlete, and that there is nothing else outside of that. So when that ends, whether it's an injury or you aren't good enough to go to the next level, right? They often go through a grieving process, right? And so it's really important for us as a community to develop multiple identities in our youth. Yes, is it great to say to a break basketball, yes, you can make it to the NBA, but it's also great to say, and if you decide to do something else, that's awesome too, right? So as far as my experience, I was a track and field athlete. So yay, track and field, but I was a thrower. I was not a runner. Yep, I was too lazy for that. But yeah, and so, being a student athlete from, 5th grade all the way up until college, I realized that by the time college was over, I wanted to do something else with my life. But I also didn't grow up with this constant message that you're going to be great, this is going to be your ticket, right? And so I was able to be all these other things. And so when it was time for me to end, I was ready, right? I was like, I get to have my own time. It's 4:00 and I get to do what I want to do. I don't have to practice, I don't have to lift, right? All of those things have been great. And so one of the things that I carry now as an administrator is to make sure that student athletes, and I shouldn't say make sure, but I try to create spaces where student athletes can be more than just a student athlete, right? So it's important that I'm telling my coaches, hey, if your student athlete wants to study abroad, let them study abroad, right? These are experiences that are really great. And if, and that's easy for me to do at a Division III institution. But at Division I, when we know they're spending countless hours on sport-related activity, it becomes difficult. But what is important is for administrators to work with study abroad programs to say, when is a good time for my programs that don't normally go, right, our high profile, men's basketball, women's basketball, football, when can they have an opportunity to study abroad? So maybe it's not a semester, maybe it's a couple weeks, right? In order to create these spaces so that students have an option to experience more. And one of the things that I always say, especially as Division I student athlete, is I didn't let the institution use me. I was also a track and field athlete, right? But I used the institution, right? So I ended up with no debt, created a great network, but really knew that this was going to be a launching pad for me. So I think if young Black men these days can think of it as being these two dual purposes, right? For me to, maybe it is to go to the league, and to, right, get a degree and have a plan B, right? And those two things they can mesh and happen just the same. One doesn't have to take a backseat to the other. Right. So to continue to let it work for you and not you work for it.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the approach that, a lot of women are able to understand that concept, but that is sometimes a very difficult task when you're trying to teach that to our boys, because since they were young, everyone told them that they're going to make it. And so you're saying something totally different. They're looking at you like, so you're not on board with what that I'm going to do. And so that can always be a challenging task, but it's up to us, I feel like, as leaders, to try to slowly introduce new things, show them and introduce them to new talents. And that was the reason why we created HSBA, because we wanted to make sure that they understood who they are within the university, who they are within athletics, not allowing the pressures of being a first generation athlete or a first generation this. You don't have to carry those burdens for your family. You don't have to carry that pressure. You're only obligated to live your life. And so that's what we do within HSBA, is really help them to identify who they are and what they're doing within that space. And so that's why we created a platform like this for women and men like yourself, where we can always say, she was a track star. These are not people that were on the sideline. We were involved. We get down and dirty. We probably both got a gym bag with tennis shoes and
exactly.
Got to get down. We will, but we also, have to really identify that space. And so I'm so glad that that's something that you make a priority about, because I created a model called Win with Why, where I go and help coaches coaches on how to create those type of environments, and how they can implement those things into their program. Because the number one thing you hear is that we don't have time. We don't have time to do this. We don't have time. You have time. And so teaching coaches, because a lot of times we're so focused on the athlete, but now I learned that I'm going to coach the coaches how to create this space. Because they listen to their coaches more than they listen to anybody. So you can talk about when you start making that transition from what did you graduate with, and did you know that you was going to be working within athletics? Did you know that was your space?
Yeah, that is funny. So when I was in college, right, I was a communication undergrad major and knew I was going to work for a PR firm, right? Sports, it was great, but good Lord, I was done with it. Realized I don't like writing, right? So I was like, So I ended up pivoting, and I was the operations manager for Kaplan Test Prep, which does test prep for the MCAT, LSAT, all that, right? I was out like 2 years, and I was like, oh no, I got to get back to athletics, right? Like you just, especially because I had such a phenomenal experience, and knowing what it's like to have administrators and coaches who are there for your support. Right? I wanted to make sure that I could pour in the same way. So then after that, I went back to grad school at Xavier University in Cincinnati, got my master's in sport administration, coached for about 10 years, worked for a nonprofit, and then was a 2-year, an AD at a 2-year institution. And one of the things you said earlier, everybody's feeding into our athletes like you're going to make it pro. At 2-year institutions, right? Our student athletes felt like they were going pro. You're not, right? Like listen, we know that Division I, the percentage is very small. So it is really hard, right? But to undo that conversation that because you played basketball, that you are going to make it to the league is certainly hard. But loved my time at Daley College, but knew that I wanted to be at a 4-year institution. One of the challenges that I foresaw as a challenge was having to kind of reinvent my culture every 2 years. As opposed to at a 4-year institution, you kind of set it, right? And then once your juniors and seniors get old, they, do it for you. So it was this kind of constant reinventing of what I believe in my culture. And certainly coaches helped make that happen, but realized that at the 4-year institution, I would have a better sense to be able to kind of make that impact. But it was time. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and go back to school. So I went back full time and got my PhD in kinesiology with a specialization in sport psychology. And everybody's like, sport psychology? And I was like, yeah. Like I knew I didn't want to be a practitioner, but the skills that I have, right, as an administrator, wellness is always at the forefront of my mind, and I can speak and know it, right? So to be able to talk about sports and wellness in the same breath and know how they fit together is really critical for me and my student athletes. And then secondly, it's people management, right? Like it's during dealing with coaches that have different personalities, dealing with students that have different personalities, and being able to like be a great listener, but help you along to buy into what I'm selling. I think it's been, really critical. But I know people are like, that makes no sense, but it actually does.
And sometimes it doesn't have to make sense. Sometimes, when people start trying to figure out what you're trying to do, it's like, I always say, find people that support you, not what you do.
Absolutely.
Because what you do may change. If I say, hey, Ryan, I think this week I want to sell hot dogs. You have to have people in your space. I'm not going to say hot dogs. Last week you was talking about whatever, but
Right.
having people that are going to say, okay, so what hot dogs are you trying to sell?
Yeah.
What makes you want to sell those hot dogs? And what's going to separate your hot dog from Wiener Schnitzel, or whatever. And that's what you need. You need people that may not understand your journey, because I really believe that, God gives us a purpose and a plan for our life, and it's your plan and it's your purpose. So it's not meant for everyone to understand. It's like either get on board or whatever, but I'm going to keep this train moving. So if you can talk about, I've been involved in athletics for a very long time. And one of the challenges I found within this journey, I used to tell Brian, when I first met him, I met him in like this networking event, and he was in the leadership, and he was coaching us on leadership skills and so forth. And I said, well, I'm focused on my doctorate right now, because I knew when I came across that stage and they put that letter in front of my name, I had people knocking on my door, right? That did not happen. Like, knocking on there is harder. Like, why aren't you looking at me? You're taking me serious.
Sure.
And so one of the challenges within athletics, and now we're kind of getting away from it a little bit, but it's the stigma of very masculine, very white, or if you get in there as a woman, you have to be very masculine. You cannot be, the nails, the makeup, the earrings, because you're not taking serious. If you can just talk a little bit about that journey for you. Did you ever have any kind of challenges when you were like, hey, I'm serious about what I'm doing? How was that journey when you were going into athletics to be a leader within the college level?
Yeah, I think you spoke to it earlier, right? It's this network that is going to follow you in your journey, right? And I always say, I am here because of others. I didn't just wake up and end up in this position, right? I surrounded myself with people who were like, let me figure out how we can get you here or how we can get you there. So for example, the last job that I had prior to here, I was the associate athletic director at a private liberal arts institution in upstate New York, Hamilton College. And so I was away from an administration for 2.5 years, right, while I was doing my coursework. But once I was done, knew I wanted to get back into administration. So I had gone to Women Leaders in College Sports, which used to be called NACWA. And I just was having conversations with all the people that I knew and was like, yeah, I'm almost done. I'm getting ready to jump back in. And one of my colleagues was like, my job's open, because she had taken another job. She said, well, my job's open. I did not. She was like, I'm gonna send you the link. She was like, and you let me know when you apply and I will make a call, right? So it's being able to have folks around you like that who are willing to be sponsors, which is pick up the phone and say, you got to take a look at this person in your pool, or mentors who can say, you need to apply for this job. Another mentor of mine, there was a job that came out at another high academic institution. And I was like, you start to doubt yourself, like, I don't know why, but I'm not going to get that job. And she was like, the search firm called you, right? Like, get in the search. And I was like, you're right. She's like, and at the end of the day, if you don't make it, it is what it is. But they called you for a reason. So there's no reason why on the front end that you would say no. So having people around you, again, that really just support you, so that, and those who understand that it's very white, it's very male, and we don't care, we're working to change that, is really what's important. And those people are both white and Black and Latinx, right? All types. And one more thing I'll throw out, because I feel like I'm getting a little long-winded.
No, you're good.
Make sure that your network of folks is diverse, right? Because what you said, it's very white and male. It took a white male to make a call for me, right? But it is people of color who have said, all right, when you get in, call me. Let me know what you need, right? So that, I think, is one thing that I want to make sure that I share with the group.
Absolutely. And that's very important. And again, it's about not just networking, but building that relationship, because that has been with me. Networking can be very exhausting.
Sure.
You meet this person, you give them a card, you hope they call you, you think you're going to connect, they get busy, you busy, and the connection's gone,
Yep.
You want to have a relationship when someone calls you and they say, hey, Dr. Schroeder? Oh, yeah, let me call her. Or You want to know people and who they are and their journeys. And that's what the Black Podcast is about, is building those real relationships. We don't want to just have guests on the show, you're off, and then we send you on your way. We want to make sure that when we're having things or you're having something for your student athletes, you can say, hey, I can call up HSBA. They can come out and speak to our athletes. And that's what it's about, is making sure that we're doing that. But it can be very challenging and difficult when you're trying to only connect with those who you believe are relevant or you need to have a relationship with, but venturing yourself out and your mentor becoming my mentor, and being okay and sharing within our community, because that is a challenge that we have a lot. I've seen women of color who are in these leadership roles that I've reached out to, like, hey, can you help me? I don't need your help like you babysit me, but can you guide me? Can you give me advice? Can you put me in the right direction? And you don't really hear anything back, and so that also makes it very challenging within our community, because there's a small selective of men and women that get in those positions.
Sure.
And then they're kind of like, hey, my journey was hard, so let me just keep our own job and not paying forward. So how important is that for you to pay forward to your community and making sure that you create that space?
It is critical, right? Like I said, I didn't get here on my own. And it is really disheartening to hear that you have reached out to women in the industry and haven't heard back, right? Because that's how we grow and this changes, is because we are bringing folks in as we climb. I really think that anytime anybody reaches out to me, no matter how busy I am, no matter how old you are, I will always make time. I had a conversation with a young woman who had just graduated. She was connected to me through a faculty member on our campus. Didn't know her. She was like, will you give her 5 minutes? Yes, I will. Right. We ended up talking for about 25 minutes, and she just had some questions about, like, now what, right? And we talked about some options and things that she could do. And by all means, I said, let me know if you have more questions. We can always hop on a phone. I will always make time. What I will also do is share other folks who will be willing to give that same time, both male and female. So it's not just me, right, carrying the burden, but that I have a committed group of people who are like, yep. And oftentimes same thing happens, is they'll be like, hey, I got somebody, I told her to reach out to you. Yep, absolutely. To make sure, like I said, because if we hold so tightly, and it's so unfortunate, right? Just because it was hard for someone, it should not be that way for those coming behind, right? Who would want that for somebody else, right? So yeah, we are absolutely trying to change that narrative so that folks know that you should be able to call anyone of color and get some time with them.
Man, I love to speak to that as well. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the TV show on Netflix called Scandal. It was once the father of the main character, which is Olivia Pope. Her father was this big underground type of, there was this one statement that he made to her that it speaks so heavily when it comes to Black women because of the multiple minority that you actually are. He said you have to work twice as hard as them to get half of what they get. So that in and of itself goes to show, and it takes me back to the movie Selma. Like, we see all of the individuals who literally gave their lives to give us an opportunity to even sit down, to even come into the same room as a table that they're sitting in. But we don't take it upon ourselves. So, you know what? I'm going to go pull up a chair. I'm going to sit at the table. You know what? When I sit at the table, I'm actually going to speak what I know is real, what I know is impactful for those who I want to serve. So we can't sit back and say, as we see these protests, can you do this for me? Can you do that? No, you go and you demand it respectfully, professionally, but go to that table and show that you deserve a seat. And when I look back at my master's program, there was this specific young man that he was very anti-white. So he was like, white folks ain't got nothing for me. Even if they were looking to be supported, I'm like, look, man, you in this program right now, you need to leverage everything that they're willing to give you and then take it back to your community. Because as you mentioned earlier, when I first started to explode in my space, it was a white man and a white woman that put me on. And the thing is, you know what? You respect them. You be thankful for them. But you say, you know what? You brought me to your table. I'm going to take a couple pieces of wood, and I'm gonna come over here in my community. I'm gonna build me a table,
Absolutely.
and then my brothers and sisters that don't have the opportunities, the privilege that I do to come and sit at your table,
Absolutely.
we're gonna build our table, and then we're not gonna have that crab in the bucket mentality. I made it. You better figure it out yourself. No, let me reach down and pull the next one up.
Yeah.
So I love that you mentioned that. For one, it's the notion of you got to go out and get it, like regardless. But then when you get it, don't be stingy, because that's how we build up our community. It's like, look, okay, I got this game, you got this game. Let's put this game together and bring up so many more individuals. So I'm glad that you spoke to that, because it's so needed in our community. So needed.
Absolutely. And that's how they got ahead, right? Like this generational wealth. It wasn't because they kept it to themselves. They passed it on to everybody else who looked like them, right? So play the game. Play the game.
That is it. That is it.
And it's good to have that boundary too, and you knowing, hey, I'm going to help you. But when you see someone putting the effort forward, they're not just come and say, can you hook me up? I'm not going to hook you up, but I will provide you with the opportunity and the tools, and and have somebody who may walk that person through it to make sure they're on the right track. But we have to get out of that. I'm not trying to hook you up. I have to sometimes tell people that I'm not asking for a hookup. I've already done the work. I just need the connection. There's a difference. And I think that that's important also, to have a boundary for yourself, that you don't get caught up with, hey, I'm willing to help you, but what are you willing to do also to make sure you make it to that next level?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you could kind of speak to, because a lot of times we can get, let's say we get that hookup, so to say. I spoke to such and such for you. Now it's like the ball's in your court. We've seen too often to where you go and get on the court, you drop the ball over and over. I'm tired of putting you on game and you're not following through. So can you speak to maybe an experience working with other colleagues, or even potentially personal experiences where you've seen opportunities being given, but then that individual either not following through because they don't have the work ethic, not following through because they weren't actually qualified? Can you kind of speak to that and the importance of actually being able to follow through?
Yeah, follow through is huge, right? But to your point, not everybody knows how to do it. So it's important for me to know who can and who can't, because the way in which I leverage you is going to be dependent upon that. Because my word, right, starts to get tarnished if I put you out there in spaces where you're not ready for, right? And that's okay. We all have the space that we need to reside in. It's up to me as a mentor or a guide or a friend or a colleague to know where that is for you. And so I think it's important for those who are new in the game, right, is this education piece. So let me give you an example. I have one young man who's connected to me through folks I know from back home, right, who's out in the area. And so the young man kind of through family was like, hey, I applied for this job, but is not connected at all to, not currently doing what we were hiring for, right? So what I said to the young man was, hey, this position is actually not going to be a good fit based on your skill set, but let's find a time so I can help you shape what you're doing so it makes sense for next time around. Didn't hear from the young person. Okay, it's fine. The next thing we hired for, right, the same name was in, the same email came through, like, hey, I'm in the pool again. I asked you to follow through. Now, not only was I in the pool, but this person listed me as a reference. I don't know this person, right? So then what I said again, hey, not a good fit. We have to talk, or we can no longer continue to do this, right? Because we have to make sure we do it the right way. But again, like I will extend myself this second time. If he doesn't reach out after that, then that's on him, right? Because this is a two-way street, and you need to have some agency in your success. It can't just be me, right? So just kind of, again, knowing who belongs where or where this person fits. So maybe it's just I introduce you to this person and I tell you to do some informational interviews, right? Maybe it's not me saying, hey, I got somebody who's going to be in your pool who's really going to be really good, right? It's maybe just helping you learn a little bit more about the game, because that's what it is, right? It is the game. So knowing all of that is super important.
All right, I got one more question. So me working, I have a social work background, so I work in the social entrepreneurship space. So I'm trying to help you develop businesses that are going to serve social good. When it comes to being an entrepreneur, you've got it and it's time to run. You don't have it and you need to develop, or you don't have it and you need to try something else. So in a leadership role, I'm sure there's calls that you have to make to where it's not going to make the person feel the best. Like, okay, this, like you were just mentioned, this isn't for you. I'm actually here in Orlando for a conference around financial education. And we have a gentleman, my partner and I, we have a gentleman that we're coaching in the entrepreneurial space, and he's not cut out to be an entrepreneur. And we try and break it to him gently, like, look, there's these other spaces where you can generate revenue, significant revenue, but you're not currently who you need to be to actually excel in this space. So kind of speak to that as far as being in a leadership role. Have you been, or how did you develop yourself to be that individual to pretty much rip off the Band-Aid?
Yeah, and I think it is my sports psychology classes, right? And I'll equate this to the conversations that I have to have if we have to part ways with a coach, right? First of all, because that's a hard conversation to have, right? But ultimately, I am at the very root of it for the betterment of you. And unfortunately, your betterment is not being an entrepreneur or being a coach here, right? Maybe it's somewhere else. And so me cutting ties with you will allow you to be better, right? And that's something that I always say is when someone gets let go or we have to go different directions, 9.999 times out of 10, they don't end up homeless, right? But we oftentimes put this like, oh, they're going to end up on the streets. No, they will probably be better. I was listening to a podcast and an HR director was talking about how anytime he would see anybody he let go, they would always say, thank you. I ended up being in a better spot, in a better position because you let me go, right? And again, it's really operating from this very human perspective of, at the end of the day, it's about how can I make you better? And it just isn't here, or it just isn't doing this, but there's something you're good at and great at. It just ain't this, right? And so how can we help you move? Now, if somebody's not ready to move as it relates to, this is my dream to be an entrepreneur and I'm hanging on to it, that's right. You've said your piece. People are humans and adults. They can make their choices. But I think you've got to determine how much energy you're going to spend and pour in when you have all these other people who you can flourish, who probably will exponentially grow from the time that you give.
Yeah. And I think that that's important too, to know that, and if you want to be a part of something like get a mentor, or you got to have tough skin, because sometimes what you think that you need to be doing. And I know that I started out in a group and I was already kind of speaking a little bit. And so when I found that I was a little ahead of the other people, not really, they didn't know what they wanted to speak about. They didn't know what they were good at. It's like, how do you expect somebody to buy a product? You don't even know what your product is. and I tell people all the time is, we have to get out of this space where we think that we have to jump on the next best thing or the trend. Sure. Everybody's not an entrepreneur, and that's okay. Everybody's not made for, you see somebody, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be a motivational speaker. Okay, so what do you want to speak about? What is your passion about? What do you think that people need to hear? I think a lot of times, especially in our community, we see the big picture. So we see the Maserati and the nice house. Mm-hmm. And think the only way to get to that is the same journey that they had. Sure. And it's not that. It's like, you might get that Maserati and that mansion by working at corporate America. You may be the best of where you're at. How do we get you to the top of where you're at and what you're doing and what you're good at? Stop trying to do what I'm doing and do your own stuff. And I think that sometimes is a problem within our community, because we only see the nice cars and the life and the this and the that, but we don't know and understand the journey, and we don't take the time to really find out, what do I want to do? Like public speaking, I knew I wanted to be in athletics, but public speaking wasn't one of the things that I wanted to do. Sure. But I kept presenting these opportunities, and then people kept asking me, and I'm like, why do you keep like, Lord, I don't like to talk in front of people. Why are you asking me to go in front of these things? But I remember when I was a head coach, and one thing my dad used to always pressure me about, he would tell me, You're a head coach now. You're doing a lot of winning. You're getting a lot of awards for Coach of the Year in Texas and this and that. You're going to have to take a Toastmaster. And I'm like,
Oh, sure.
I don't know who Toast and who the master is, but I don't have time to do that because I'm not trying to speak in front of nobody, And so here we are. And now it's like, he reminds me, 40 years later, and he's like, I told you, you didn't even start taking Toastmaster. You could have been taking that 20 years ago, but you didn't want to listen. But, we all have to understand we have our own journey and our own story. So I want you to talk about, because you mentioned a little bit about it before, you being a woman in this role, and now here comes that opportunity where you have to speak to that head football coach. And he's looking at you like, you have never played football. You have no idea what it takes for blah, 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 blah. How was that? How was your experience that first time that you got into this role? You're like, seriously? I already got to fire somebody, only been here 4 days. What was that experience like for you when it was time for you to let go or separate from a male coach? What was that experience for you?
Yeah, so back in my 2-year institution days, it was a men's basketball coach, right? I think, and I'll speak to the football because I have an example that I think is really critical. So that certainly at the Division I level is a lot of things that women hear when they're interviewing for Division I institutions that have football, right? It's like, oh, you don't know football, right? And it's like, but you're not expecting me to know rowing or gymnastics, right? So, and it's really about knowing the business. But one of the things that I did at my previous institution is, so I got hired maybe a couple of weeks later, met up with the football coach and was like, hey, would you mind if I just came up and watched film with you all? And he was like, yeah. So I spent 3 weeks up there watching film, right? And just like not knowing what they were talking about, right? But I would come down and be like, okay, so when you're talking about this and this, and I know routes, I know like general sense, right? But they are talking about X's and O's in a way that I had never heard it. But being invested in wanting to learn it, right, certainly gave me credibility with him. And then now that I've moved on, right, I can talk a little bit deeper with my next football coach about the game, right? So I think that certainly helped. But still, parting with someone who's like, you don't know, you're a woman, right? And it's like, if I got to pull out my All-American plaque back there, right? Like if I got to do all that, I will, right? Or my Hall of Fame statue, I will, right? And I think that also helps me and gives me credibility in spaces where somebody else might get questioned. And then I've also coached, right? So all of these things that I've done is like, this ain't nothing new, right? So
right. And that can still be a little, I guess in the beginning, a little overwhelming when you feel like you have to constantly show, okay, do you take me serious now? I have this. Do you take me serious now? I have this and I have that and I have this. And sometimes you feel like, why do I have to keep showing all this? But like you said, if I have to do it for you, then we can go there, but I'm trying not to go there with you. And I think it's important. It shows a lot about your character and who you are within that space that, a lot of times once you make it to the top or once you make it to where you want to be, that's quote unquote the easy part. It's now staying there. So what can you do to continue to grow? And so the fact that you are taking time to say, hey, I may not know, but I'll go find out. So I'll sit here for 3 weeks until I understand. And that just shows that, hey, we're all growing. And a lot of times our coaches have to see that, your coaching doesn't just end at the end of practice. Right. What are you doing that is constantly going to make you grow? Because our athletes watch us. They want to know, what are we doing? Our young men and women, they want to see themselves when they look at you. Yeah. And if they don't see greatness and they don't see success, then how do you create that space, for them, to your athletes to want to be successful? I mean, I tell people all the time, I went into an interview and they're like, what do we expect to see when you go in your practice? Consistency, teamwork. Yeah. You're going to see structure. Yeah. You're going to see girls or boys that want to win. from the worst person on the team to the best person on the team. Everybody's trying to win. And I always tell them winning is not just about the gold medal, but I'm talking about everybody's pushing to be better.
Absolutely.
I tell them, I'm always pushing to be better, so that's just something that we have to do within our community, is not get so complacent with where we're at, but what can we do to continue to grow? So what are some of the things that you're doing within your leadership role? And what is the big picture for you? Like when you look at the direction you're going, what are some of the things that you're doing right now to get to that place, or are you good where you're at now?
Yeah, so I was just named the director of athletics at Pomona-Pitzer Colleges. And so this is my first year. Yeah. So, and I had a COVID year and I'm like, okay, we'll figure out what it's like to actually cheer on sports. And I am at a really phenomenal institutions where I have a lot of support. I have a really great staff of coaches and support staff. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. But I think what's really important for me, as you talked about, is to really continue to grow. So staying involved in networking. So I mentioned earlier, women leaders in college sports, Minority Opportunities and Athletic Association, MOA is the acronym. NACTA, which is the National Association of Collegiate Directors of Athletics. There's tons of organizations out there that will allow you to grow and develop. Because I don't know everything, and there's always somebody out there who's doing it better. And so also reaching out to other people to say, hey, what are you doing with this? What are you doing with that? Hey, fundraising is something I'm interested in doing better. What are you doing that's cutting edge? And also, being Division III, also learning from my Division I and Division II colleagues, right? Because even though the things that they're doing are slightly different or for slightly different purpose, there are some ways that I can change it, and it makes it very relevant from where I'm at. So always being ready to learn. And also learning happens from folks around me. I don't ever step into a room and pretend like I know everything. If I don't know, I will say, that's a good question, let me get back to you. Or I will point to a colleague who might be a coach. It might even be assistant coach. Coach, what are your thoughts, right? Because we're in this together. And so really understanding that it is okay for me to, as you talked about in the beginning, be vulnerable. I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And that vulnerability will also build capital with the folks that I work with.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I think, again, like when you're talking about just that growing, I feel like it's always needed. I know for myself, when I feel like I'm in a space too long and I'm not growing, I'm ready to move around. Sure. I've always been in PE, so I've been 16 years in the classroom. And so I just know that every year, and I hear teachers stand up and they're like, where are the teachers that have 15 years? And people stand up, and then, where's the teachers that have 25 years? And they stand up, and I'm just like, are y'all crazy? We're not doing anything. I'm not doing anything for 30 years, not the same anyway.
Sure.
By 30 years, I need to got a suit on, not these basketball shorts or tights or none of that. And so I think that we just have to get out of that space, because I tell people all the time, when you're in education, you have to be in this space of constantly growing. Because if you're not growing, your students are only going to be as successful as you are. And so if you're just sitting there and you're okay with just sitting in the gym, you got to want to do something too, so that the kids can see, like, oh, wow. Because I know that when I graduated with my doctorate, the kids were like, so you can actually get a doctorate degree in sports? They don't know, because they think of the doctor as working at the hospital, and that was my opportunity to say, absolutely. You can go and get a doctorate in this or in that, that was my opportunity to say, don't allow people to put you in a box.
Absolutely.
Because even when it was time for me to transition from people calling me coach or miss to even adults had a hard time adapting. They would say, well, we're just so used to calling you coach. Can we just, and it's like, no, you need to make those changes. And it's certain places that you feel like you have to do that, right? Yeah. When you're looking different than everybody, and if that's what you need for them to be like, oh, okay, so she's not just a track coach.
Right.
That's the time that you say, yes, put some respect on my name.
Yeah.
When you're at a family reunion, it's something different,
Sure.
or when you're out with your girlfriends. But I think that it's important that we're constantly finding that space to grow and surrounding ourselves around people that allow us to be who we are. So when I say, hey, when I decide to do the podcast, or we decide to do the podcast, or even the business, I know what I'm good at. I can call him and say, hey, Brian, so I was thinking, blah, 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 blah. And he'll be like, okay, let me sit on that for a little bit. And then he'll get with me the next day and say, okay, so this is what it looks like.
Sure.
Is this what you're talking about? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking, so, and that's okay. And that's what the beauty of relationships are, is finding what people are doing that you can capitalize on. So who's in your circle as far as, do you have mentors, or who's in your space that is constantly making you grow and push you towards where you're going?
Yeah, I would say, so I've got quite a few. And what I'll also say is mentors can come and go. I think sometimes as you start building mentorships, right, you feel like you have to consistently have the same mentor that you had when you were 21, right? They will come and go just like regular relationships, and that's okay, right? So right now I would say, so the athletic director who was at Hamilton College, he is certainly a mentor of mine and is there whenever I need him. He has prepped me and positioned me to be successful in the position I am today, and I owe a lot to him. And there are tons of people, colleagues that I work with. So Angel Mason down at Berry College, Renee Bostic over at SUNY New Paltz, even folks in Division I spaces, Sharita Freeman, who's over at Lafayette College, right? So there's a lot of women and people that I can certainly call on. And I'll also say some Division II folks, Darnell Smith, who's down at, now he's NAIA, but he used to be Division II. Texas A&M, San Antonio, I think. I always forget which city it is. But yeah, there's tons of them. But like I said, they are different colors, genders, which is really important, because then that helps me kind of stay rounded and grounded.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you made, that it's okay when you've outgrown that relationship. Doesn't mean that your relationship has ended, but it's like, okay, maybe the advice I was getting from them was relevant for that season I was in when I was looking for, a teaching job. Now that you're looking for, it's okay to kind of change your space of influence. You still have their support, but now it's time to make sure that you're surrounding or getting mentored with people who are in that space. To make sure that you're staying up on what's, the newest thing or whatever, because what they did in 19 whatever ain't gonna cut it, right? So,
right.
What they're doing right now.
Absolutely.
That's important.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that, Sherelle, because the mentor, the primary mentor in the space that you and I met, there were certain things that he could teach us that I feel has been very helpful for us. But the mentorship that he was given, eventually we outgrew it. Like we were beyond that, and we had to go and seek out further mentors, and now we're cross mentoring one another to better each other. Something I wanted to circle back to Dr. Merrill is your mentioning of consistent growth and being that example for the next generation, because if they see us remaining complacent in one position, they're going to think that it's okay for them to be complacent. But at the same time, if they see you in a certain position excelling, a lot of times they automatically think, okay, I need to do that. Sherelle may reference to it earlier. I need to do that if I want to be successful. But no, like, you can learn from me, but find what is your passion, your purpose, your calling, and let me help you birth that.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things that, when I was living in Miami, there were people who saw me speaking in front of various different audiences to recruit foster parents. And they're like, oh, Brian, you need to be a motivational speaker, so on and so forth. So I'm like, no, I'm not about that life. Like, I don't even know what that's about. Then I researched and hold up, they make some nice money. So I started to study certain motivational speakers. And I'm like, okay, I like that approach. When it comes to the population that I want to pour into it, I just need to take a little bit of that one, kind of mix it all up into my own recipe and figure out what direction I'm meant to go in. So being a mentor, it's often that we have to redirect our mentees and let them know, no, You don't have to be like me when you grow up. You can be you, but with the same level of self-confidence that I exude, the same level of competence in whatever space you're actually operating in. So before we leave, if you had someone out there that was idolizing a mentor, a leader in some area, what would you say, some pointers that you would give them to discover what direction they're meant to be going and how to kind of discover their purpose?
And I also want you to answer this. Can you talk about the benefits of those who are entering in, because you're at a D3 school, right?
Yes.
So I know what me and Brian did a study on this before, that a lot of within our community think that they have to go to the University of wherever, because that's what's on the TV, right? So if you can also speak on just what are the benefits of, you can come to a D3 school and the benefits of coming to a D3 and doing a D1 and whatever. So if you can also add that in there with Brian's question.
Absolutely. Okay, so Brian's question, I think the biggest thing or the piece of advice that I would give is to have those conversations, right? Informational interviews to learn about people's journeys, how they got there, what they learned from it is really going to help you to, like you said, take those pieces and for me to make them my own. So I am always talking about people, right? How did you get where you were at? And, being able to do that, I think is critical, especially if it's someone that you admire. And also from afar, watching how they move, right? While someone on paper may look great, you may see them at a conference and you're like, whoa, right? So kind of watching them from afar, I think is also important. So to just switch and talk about Division III, and I'm so glad you allowed me to talk about this. Normally I try to shove it in there when I can, but yes, like Division III is wonderful. So Division III, our philosophy is that, right, people talk about the business of athletics, right? That Division I athletes are getting exploited, blah, 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 right? So Division III is the purest form of college athletics. Our student athletes don't have scholarships, so they do it for the love of the game, which doesn't mean that they're not competitive, right? Because we have some really great competition that happens, but they do it for the love, which allows them to go study abroad, right? Be president of the class, be a sponsor, be a member of this club, right? And to develop their identities and do much more with their college experience than this grind of going to class and being an athlete. And I certainly understand it, right? Because as a Division I athlete, I understand it. But being able to really pour into students in themselves as a whole is really important to me. I'm not interested in the business of athletics. And I think that those who are, that's fine, right? I'm not judging. I think we all have a place in this world of college sports, but being able to help students. One other thing I'll say is being an AD at a Division III, all of my students know who I am, right? They're like, hey, Dr. Merrill, right? As opposed to when I was at the University of Cincinnati, I knew Bob Goins, only because I was a leader within our SAC committee. But other than that, if you would talk to most student athletes, they would be like, I don't know who our AD is, right? And so that's, for me, I'm making my impact when students know who I am. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, and I think that's important, like you said. And that's also a great start to really know and discover what you're interested in and what you're trying to do and get used to the college life and the balancing of athletics. And you can always move around from there. I tell people all the time, you ain't stuck. Yes. You're not stuck there, No. So if that's where you have to go, and what we do sometimes as coaches, high school, sell kids on this dream of Division I. And you have to, I used to tell my girls all the time when I was coaching them, everybody in here is not going to be a Division I track girl.
Nope.
But this is what I can do. Because you have some that still believe that they will. But every time they would come into study hall, I would have all the current times of Division I. Yep. All the current times of Division II, all the current times of Division III.
That's awesome.
Now, where do you fall at on it? You look for yourself. So it's not me telling you that 26 ain't gonna cut it. You will cut it maybe over here.
Sure.
If we drop your time down a little bit, you may be able to get you a scholarship. But if you're trying to get a scholarship to the University of Texas or University of, Texas Tech or whatever, this is what those girls are running, and they're on full scholarship. So if you want that to be your goal, hey, let's go get it. But that means you're willing to, that means you're not coming to practice looking for your spikes. That means you're not looking for your bag. I'm not getting calls saying you're not going to make it today, because that's going to bring you back on this side of the scholarship. And so I think that's important, that you present those things to your athletes so they can see you can make it. I'm not telling you can't be a Division I, but this is what Division I is doing. So if you're willing to say, if you come and say, hey, coach, I still feel I want to make it, I'm going to say, let's get it. If we got to be out here all night, we'll be out here all night. But you have to show me that you want, and again, that's how you're talking with your athletes and with your coaches is I'll help you the whole way, but you're going to have to show me that that's what you want to do. You can't say you want to be a millionaire, but you showing habits of spending money on unnecessary things. Yes. That's not how you become a millionaire. And so I always make sure that that's important, that we present that so that our athletes can see the big picture. So I really appreciate you really finding relevance in your athletes knowing who you are, and being able to speak to you, and you never know what journey, they may not want to be athletic director or whatever, but they may see someone that like, hey, I may want to, like you said, go into whatever. But I think Division III is always a good place to start if you feel like you're just, you're not ready for Division I or Division II or whatever, because you can always move around. You're not stuck in that space. And I think parents really need to get away from pressuring our students to think that they have to go to, the Pac-10 or the, whatever. Because that's not, the important part is the education.
It is. And to that very same point, right? It's choose the experience, not the institution, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to go to X institution because it's got a big name and your coach is not a healthy person, right? It's not good, right? So go where right? You'll get a gut feeling of the people who I'm going to be surrounded with in the institution itself is where I belong. And that's how I ended up at Cincinnati. To be very honest, on a quick aside, I played 8 years of AAU and thought I was going to college to play basketball, right? I did track and field and was good at it, so I continued. And I was like, okay, Cincinnati's Division I, but we all know I'm playing basketball, right? Got it to campus and was like, track it is, right? Like, so it's go with the experience and not the institution.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. Like you said, at the end, you're trying to get an education, and stop focusing on all the other stuff. And I tell them, you can go to the University of Texas, but nobody's going to see you. You're going to be sitting on the bench. So would you rather go somewhere where you can play and do the things that you love to do, or you want to sit back and be a cheerleader? Because that's what's going to happen if you don't prepare yourself to go to these big colleges, because it's very political. I tell them the higher it goes, the more political it becomes. So you have to be ready to play that game as well. And we've had a lot of professional athletes come on who have shared those experiences. They've put all their eggs in a basket and they get to wherever and they find out, oh, this is not what I signed up for, but you're already there. Parents have already quit their job and moved the family up to Mississippi to watch you because you're about to make it to the whatever. And they don't realize that the coach done wrong in their own people. Now you're sitting on the bench. So those things happen all the time. So I think it's so important that we teaching our athletes and our students to just really understand and identify who they are within the educational system. So I appreciate your leadership and your vulnerability and making sure that you stay true so that others around you can grow. And I appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah. And I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you all and share. I could talk to you for another 2 hours, I feel like, but I do appreciate the invitation. It's been great.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it as well. We definitely, individuals like yourself who are in the academic space, but also have that athletic background, we truly, deeply desire to build a genuine connection, because we want to be able to leverage one another. We want to be able to lend support, to lend value to what it is you've got going on, and vice versa. So we'll definitely be in communication. You'll be getting some emails. We sent out our monthly newsletter about halfway through the month. So keep an eye out for that. And actually, I'm not sure if she mentioned at the top of the show because I was getting my technical stuff good. But today makes the first day of our second year. It's our anniversary. So we're definitely going to be circling back around. But off of that note, what are some things you've got going on? Potentially some recruiting activity, whatever you got going on in your space that we can, share with our audience.
Yeah, so I think right now we are looking for some interns. So for those who aren't familiar with Pomona-Pitzer, we are in Southern California, just outside of LA. And we're actually interested in those who might be interested in doing an internship remotely. So the departments are Director of Intramural Sports and Club Sports. We also are Department for Sports Information or Athletics Communication, our events group, and just administration overall. So if there's anybody out there who's interested in gaining some experience, and even if you aren't in the Southern California area, we have some virtual opportunities for you to contribute. So, yeah.
All right. Sounds good. And drop that on our screen here shortly. Absolutely. So we are so thankful to have you.
I think that's so important too, that you talk about intern, because I wish people would have taught that to me earlier. And now here I'm 40, you're like, you want to do an intern? It's like, I don't know if I can work when I get paid.
Right.
I need to make some money, I got bills. But I think that that's important, that we do start introducing internship to our youth, because you may just get in and discover that you like it, or you end up finding out you don't like what you thought you were going to like. I think that is so important. So thank you for sharing that, and we'll make sure we continue to share that on our platform, so that our athletes or our students, whoever that may think they have an interest in sports management or whatever,
Sure.
This is a perfect opportunity to find out if you really like it, or if you even want to put in the time it takes to be,
Absolutely.
to do that job, because it's not just sitting in the office.
Yes, and it's not just going to games. Everybody assumes that my job is, that's like 3% of my job.
And get, nice, appeal and wear football stuff. You are going to be working. Yes. No weekend, no Saturday, Sundays off to just. So that's a great thing, as internship does allow you to see that whole picture. But we do truly appreciate you. And of course, my Sora, I knew she was going to be wonderful. But I am so honored to be connected with you. And we're so grateful to have you within our circle, because we will be sending some stuff out to you that can really help your athletes and student athletes that are on your campus, and just even the students, your regular student body, making sure that they understand who they are within the educational system. And so thank you for opening up your space. I know you're busy, but allowing us to come in and take up an hour of your time to learn more about you and what you do, because I believe that it's important that our students, our youth, and our community see women like yourself who are open and willing to be vulnerable and share their story and their journey, because that's what we need to grow as a unit. So we appreciate you for that.
And thank you. And certainly reach out. sagehens.com is where you can find me. If you have any questions or want to get connected, feel free to connect with me there.
Now spell that for us real quick.
Yes, Sagehens, SAGEHENS.com. I guess I should also throw in my Instagram, since I'm trying to be better about social media. Social media is MG_Merrill, like Merrill Lynch, MERRILL. And then, that one's like my more professional page. So feel free to connect with me there.
Got it.
Well, thank you again, Doc, and just continue to be great. And I know that you haven't even touched the surface of what you're going to be doing in the future, but I know that school is lucky to have you, and you're going to do some amazing things there. And I can just see they're going to say, oh, she created this and she created that. Hey, I'm all for it. So we're going to be there for you. You'll be there. So thank you so much for that. And we'll put you in the backstage and we'll close you out.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Well, another great leader, and it's good to see. We talk about the lack of leaders that we have within universities as far as the numbers wise of women and men. And so it's good to see a Black woman in this space and able to make this type of impact and still understand the importance of self-identity and athletics. I think that's an important part, because not too many people want to feel comfortable enough to talk about those things.
That's real, and I love it. Just being able to be authentic in the space that you occupy is a great example for our next generation to understand. You don't have to live this social media space wanting to impress everybody else. Be you, and the right opportunities will come about. And the people who are truly meant to be around you will actually be magnetized towards you and be part of that support system.
Hey, yep. So you'll catch us here every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time. So please make sure you are looking up for our next guest that we have. It's always going to be good. So I don't want to hear, I wonder who's going to be on this week. It don't matter because they're going to be good. And so just make sure you tune in and you share this video because we do appreciate your support. You can always go to We Are HSBA and find out what we're doing in our community and the programs that we have to offer. If you want to be a volunteer, if you want to jump on board and see how you can contribute with your skills, we're always looking for people in our community that want to help build. So We Are HSBA. Please make sure you look for that, and also subscribe to our email list because we always have events or things that you can be a part of. So again, this is the Black Podcast. We thank you for your support, and we will see you next Thursday.
Same place, same time. Y'all have a great weekend.